Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'll take you step by step through the voting process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as we get ready for general elections. First, let's meet the Supervisor of Elections, Mrs. Dora James, who is appointed by the Governor-General and is the overall administrator of the electoral process. Now let's see what happens on Election Day. Your polling station opens at 7 a.m. As you enter, you will see the directions for the guidance of voters in voting. The presiding officer will open the ballot box in the presence of everyone to ensure it's empty. The ballot box is then locked and placed in full view of everyone present in the polling station. When it's your turn to vote, you must present your ID card and state your name for all to hear. The poll clerk will check the voters list and ensure that your name and voter number correspond to the info on the voter registration card. The clerk will also place a mark on the voters list next to your name and voter's number. Here's what the presiding officer will do next. Examine your finger for any marks that indicate you have already voted. Put the election official mark on the ballot paper along with his or her initials. Mark the voter's number on the counterfoil of the ballot and give you instructions on how to vote. The presiding officer will also detach the ballot from the ballot book, fold it, and then hand it to you. You will then enter the private voting booth, where you would use a black lead pencil to mark an X in the space of the ballot, which contains the name and symbol of your candidate choice. After voting, fold the ballot, leaving the initials of the presiding officer and the official mark visible. Hand the ballot to the presiding officer, who will check that the ballot has initials and the official mark. Once you've cast your vote, the presiding officer will then tell you to dip your right index finger in the indelible ink. He or she will then remove the counterfoil and place the ballot in the ballot box for you and all others present to see. Congratulations, you have voted. If you are in the voting line at 5 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. Thanks for watching.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. As you know, this is the eve of general elections here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, scheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, November 5th, 2020. With us on the program, we have the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Simone Keizer-Beache. We are expected to be joined by the Deputy Supervisor of Elections about midway through the program. But in the meantime, we talk to Dr. Beache about some of the things that are in place from a health standpoint for the general elections in view of COVID-19.
Okay, good evening. Thanks for having me. We have been working closely with the Electoral Office in terms of conducting elections during the COVID pandemic. As you know, St. Vincent, we currently have no community spread, no local spread. We have 76 cases now, of which 5 of them are active, and we have 71 recovered cases. And based on that scenario, and also the scenario where we have done extensive screening, exposure screening, we have found no evidence of any sort of exposure in the general community, we came up with the guidelines to advise on the conduct of elections. And basically we are advising masks, but masks are not mandatory. We are asking that persons space where possible, but we are not making that a major focus either. And we are asking the persons in the polling stations to use masks and gloves as necessary. One of the major challenges or potential challenges was the fact that we have persons returning to St. Vincent who would be in quarantine, and the need for those persons to be able to vote was considered. And we determined that those persons in day 6 to day 14, day 6 to day 14, those are low-risk persons, because by then those persons have arrived with a negative test. They have a negative test on testing on arrival, and they have a 5-day negative test. So we found that those persons were pretty low risk compared with, say, those who just arrived, and then day 1 to day 5, those were medium risk, and then those in isolation who are positive, that's high risk. So we determined that the low risk persons, day 6 to day 14, that they can vote. Those are normal persons on quarantine but at home. And so we've made arrangements to allow for those persons to vote.
Okay, so those on the first 5 days would definitely not.
No, they're not
exercise.
going to. Right. So they're not going to be able to exercise their right to vote because they're not going to be allowed to come out of quarantine. So the order that they were given, served with at the airport on arrival, would stand.
Okay. You're saying that masks are recommended but not mandatory.
That's right.
How so?
Because, again, as we have no community spread, we have no local spread. And the masks, we recommend them, just as we've been recommending that person use them when you are in a situation where you can't distance. So we are not going to be saying that if you turn up at the polling station, you cannot vote because you don't have a mask. That's what we didn't want to, we didn't want to scare persons away or have any sort of decreased turnout because persons didn't feel comfortable in a mask. Some persons
may not have one.
Or may not have one. So we're saying, come, if you have your mask, you bring your mask. If you don't have a mask, one might be provided for you, but that you're not going to be prevented from entering the polling station or from joining the line if you don't have a mask on.
So would a mask be provided at the polling stations?
So we provided, and I know we provide as in health, we provided some masks for those persons who might not come with a mask. But we are asking other persons, if you have a cloth mask or if you have a disposable dust mask, you can bring it, walk along with it, and you can use that while you're there at the polling station.
Let's talk about the actual operations at the polling station tomorrow.
Okay. So for the general voter, that's the person who's not in quarantine, they would line up with space between. Again, we're not going to attempt to enforce any spacing. There will be sanitization of your hands as you enter the polling station. So the assumption is that you have a mask on. So your hands will be clean with a sanitizer that would be provided there. If you have sensitive skin or you are very particular about the sanitizer you would want to use, you can bring your own sanitizer to use, okay? So you would clean your hands first. You would take off the mask so that you can be identified. You would put the mask back on and you will sanitize again because you have touched the mask. Okay, then you would get your ballot. You go into the booth and you then mark your X and you come out. You would then sanitize the hands again before you dip your finger into the ink.
And that's it.
And that's it. The pencils that would be provided, those pencils would be sanitized. So, and the thing is that the persons in the polling station would, on a regular basis, be sanitizing surfaces. They will be wearing masks and gloves, and they are responsible for ensuring that they continuously clean the areas.
Okay, so definitely the polling staff will definitely have preventative
they'll be wearing the masks and the gloves.
Equipment. Okay, so what is the personal responsibility of the voter in ensuring that this process and these protocols work?
So as we said, just for them to understand, okay, we don't have community spread, but let us just be cautious. So you bring your own mask. If you have a cloth mask, as I said, you can bring that. If you don't, you can bring a dust mask or a surgical mask, and you can wear that. You put it on while you're in the line, and then you will come in and you just follow the instructions. It's different to previous years, but we're in a different situation. And it would just be a matter of cleaning, dip, dry, and that's it. You go.
And you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about those persons who are getting the special exemption.
Yes.
How is this going to work? Is it that they're going to be issued certificates and which will be delivered to them, hand delivered to them, and what's the process here?
Okay, so under the Public Health Order of 2020, under Section 5, you're allowed to provide an exemption from being in quarantine because you were serving an order which says you must be in quarantine for 14 days. And so we are issuing these exemptions. You're being served with this exemption, which will allow you to come out from 4:30 to 5:30. 4:30, giving you sufficient time to get to the polling station. And under an SRO that was done on Friday, which allowed for the extension of the time of voting from, instead of 7 to 5, it's been extended to 5 to 5:30, so that these persons on the 6 to 14 quarantine, that's when they will vote. So the order, which will be served, which is what should happen, so throughout the day, the healthcare workers, along with the police, they have been serving these orders to everybody who is supposed to be voting, and they are in that quarantine period. So they would be able to leave their homes from 4:30 to get to the polling station. When they get there, if regular voters are still in the line, they present themselves, the quarantine voter on exemption, presents himself to the police officer on duty and lets him know, I am here. But you don't join the line immediately. So that once the regular voters have finished and left the polling area and left the line, then these persons who have an exemption, they will join the line and go through the usual voting process.
And we're happy that this process would be maintained. I mean, you must report to a police officer when you get there.
Yes. So because we don't want persons just joining the line, because we know there's anxiety. So you report, the police officers have been provided with the names of these persons. So you would come up and you would have your order and you present it to them. You have your mask on at all times. This is who I am. I have this order. I'm allowed to be out. I'm to vote. Police officer says, okay, you can hold on here. If you're in a vehicle, hold on in the vehicle until the others have finished. But you are there before 5 so that you can join the line after and you proceed. So all of the parties, the political parties, have been provided with this list of names of those persons who have been currently in quarantine and would end between the 6th and the 14th, and have been found by the electoral office to be eligible to vote. So this list was provided to the various parties. It's been provided to all of the polling stations and their staff, and also the police.
What exactly does the exemption certificate say?
Okay, so I can read it out for you if you want. Read it out. So the certificate says that this exemption is granted to the name and on the date. So whether it's the 3rd or the 4th, to exercise the powers conferred under Section 5 of the Public Health, Port Health Regulation number 2, Order 2020, number 25 of 2020. I hereby permit you to leave quarantine on the 5th day of November 2020 for the purpose of voting in the general elections held on that date, and be at the time and in the manner the Chief Medical Officer determines. Immediately after voting, you must return to your place of quarantine and be quarantined in accordance with the Public Health Port Health Regulation number 2, Order 2020, and it is signed by the Minister of Health, who is the minister responsible for this act, the Port Health Act. Okay, and the specific orders of the Chief Medical Officer: 1, you are permitted to leave quarantine at 4:30 p.m. on November 5th, 2020, to reach your allocated polling station by 5 p.m. but no later than 5:30 p.m. to vote. You must wear a face mask for the entire duration, and notice this time, because these are persons under quarantine who are low risk, but still there's a risk, they must wear the mask. So you must wear a face mask for the entire duration of the period out of quarantine, except for the removal of the mask when so requested for the purpose of identification. You must follow all instructions in terms of spacing and sanitization. You must travel to the allocated station in a vehicle, which allows for sufficient spacing between you, mask, and a suitably masked driver if you. So you can drive yourself to the polling station if you want to. You have on your mask in your car, or you put it on when you come out. If you're being driven, you need to have on the mask, and the driver needs to have on the mask. The windows need to be open, no AC, and that's the safe way of getting to the polling station. Number 5, immediately upon arrival at the polling station, you must indicate to the police officer that you are present to vote and wait in the vehicle, if you're in a vehicle, until you are directed to exit the vehicle to vote. After voting, you must immediately return to the vehicle and to your place of quarantine in accordance with the Public Health Port Regulation number 2, Order 2020. So that is the entire document.
Very specific. We'll be back after this short break.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'll take you step by step through the voting process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as we get ready for general elections. First, let's meet the Supervisor of Elections, Mrs. Dora James, who is appointed by the Governor General and is the overall administrator of the electoral process. Now let's see what happens on Election Day. Your polling station opens at 7 a.m. As you enter, you will see the directions for the guidance of voters in voting. The presiding officer will open the ballot box in the presence of everyone to ensure it's empty. The ballot box is then locked and placed in full view of everyone present in the polling station. When it's your turn to vote, you must present your ID card and state your name for all to hear. The poll clerk will check the voters list and ensure that your name and voter number correspond to the info on the voter registration card. The clerk will also place a mark on the voters list next to your name and voter's number. Here's what the presiding officer will do next. Examine your finger for any marks that indicate you have already voted. Put the election official mark on the ballot paper along with his or her initials. Mark the voter's number on the counterfoil of the ballot and give you instructions on how to vote. The presiding officer will also detach the ballot from the ballot book, fold it, and then hand it to you. You will then enter the private voting booth, where you would use a black lead pencil to mark an X in the space of the ballot, which contains the name and symbol of your candidate choice. After voting, fold the ballot, leaving the initials of the presiding officer and the official mark visible. Hand the ballot to the presiding officer, who will check that the ballot has initials and the official mark. Once you've cast your vote, the presiding officer will then tell you to dip your right index finger in the indelible ink. He or she will then remove the counterfoil and place the ballot in the ballot box for you and all others present to see. Congratulations, you have voted. If you are in the voting line at 5 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. Thanks for watching.
It's pretty comprehensive. What is the responsibility of the exempted voter in all of this?
Okay, so it's really important. They are still in quarantine. there's still some level of risk, even though they had their 3 negative tests, and we have found that generally most persons by day 5 we pick up if they are COVID positive. So their risk of being infected and passing on the disease is very low. But still, you are under quarantine order, which, if you break the order, you can be charged $1,000. Just this week, somebody who breached the order was fined $6,000. $6,000 because remember each day is that you add, right? So each day is a new offense.
Okay.
So if you don't comply, you can be charged, and this is just because we want persons to be safe, to reduce any chance of spread. So we are asking persons to really comply with that, and they also should understand that others are anxious. Some of the queries we got was, if people in quarantine are going to be voting, I don't want them in the line with me. This is a real concern for some persons, and so we are asking those persons who are being released, who have been given the waiver, to do what the waiver is for. You get yourself to the polling station, you vote, and you get back to your place of quarantine. Because remember, there are some persons who are going to finish 5-day quarantine tomorrow at, say, 3 o'clock. They are going to be able to vote. So they are coming out of the 5-day, and they're expected to continue for another 9 days. And we really don't want those persons coming out 5-day, go and vote, and then they're out liming, because they are just past that medium risk period. So we're really asking persons to comply, and let us not have to go down a route of having to charge persons for breaking quarantine.
So we're talking about how many persons who will be granted these exemptions in terms of a total, and are these people from the Lenton but of St. Vincent and the Grenadines?
Yes. So we started gathering the names from our system in terms of persons entering, both at the Argyle and all of the other airports or the ports of entry. So we work closely with our IT team and also with the immigration office. And I want to thank the Chief Immigration Officer for providing us with information from the Grenadines. So anybody who came into St. Vincent after the 22nd of October until the 31st of October, those persons would qualify for the 14 days, would fall into that 14-day bracket or less, up to day 5 of persons who can vote. And that number came up to over 500 in terms of persons coming into St. Vincent during that period. But of that number, of that 500, a little over 242, and then when we even went further and we broke it down, because there were some persons who came from Barbados, and if we remember, the protocols changed pretty quickly. So between the 25th to the 31st, Barbados was not, persons coming from Barbados did not have to quarantine. So we're looking at about around 200 persons who are eligible to be out of quarantine for the 1 hour period, because they are in the day 6 to day 14, and the electoral office has found that those persons are registered and are eligible to vote.
I gather that there's a question, but I'm not seeing it. I'm wondering if technical people can put it on the screen for me, because I'm not seeing it on my screen here. Or if someone can bring the question to the studio. We have some challenges with us this evening, so let's talk a little bit about persons who are eligible to vote but have not received their certificates.
Because today, the community health staff, as I said, they were charged with serving the orders. Now, they went into the communities and they used the numbers provided. And so, in some cases, apparently these numbers provided when persons came in through the airport were incorrect. And so we have been unable to locate some persons, but we serve quite a few. And then a lot of persons are in the hotel still because, as I said, they come out tomorrow. So we are going to deliver those orders to those persons in the hotel. They will get them tomorrow because we have to make sure they have their third test is negative. You can't give somebody to leave and we don't know what. So those persons will get that tomorrow. Other persons got their were served today. Anybody who has not been served and they fall into that category of day 6 to day 14 and they believe they've seen their name is on the voters list, they need to contact us at 458-6366.
Okay, and I'm sure the guys can put that number on the screen for us. There's a question, more of a comment though. Trump up fares. It's all hyped up around the idea of voting. Why stigmatize the process? People in quarantine have been tested at least 3 times. Otherwise, they cannot appear in public. Why not educate the public instead of propagating fear?
Well, we try to, but we also have to recognize that in some cases, despite your best efforts in terms of reassuring, educating, some persons are still going to have fears. And so therefore, you balance it. So the balance was, do we say, oh, nobody comes out at all? No, because we recognize that we have tested you 3 times. The likelihood of you having COVID is very low. But we also recognize that even with that, there's some persons who are still going to be anxious. And this is St. Vincent, where we have had persons testing positive after day 5. So Vincentians are aware of that. They're aware of that possible risk. It's slim, but it exists. And so we need to understand where that fear is coming from. We need to educate persons, but still even then recognize that it is there and put things in place which can ease the fears of both sets of persons. You know, those persons who are going to be voting and those persons in that group who might not want to feel as if they're coming in and then somebody makes a comment, or I don't want to be around you. So we need to, just this day, let us understand and let us come up with a compromise.
And that's a very real situation, because I am sure that there are people saying they don't want to be in the same line. It's a reality that we face here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
It is.
So have you had any concerns, complaints from people who think or know that they are in fact on the voting list but have not gotten their exemptions? Yes,
so we've had a few persons who have contacted us and pointed out that they're aware of the fact that the names are not appearing, and so what we did is that we double checked to make sure they're eligible in terms of quarantine, so they fall into the 6-day to 14-day, and then we communicated with the electoral office for them to do a second check to see if indeed these persons are eligible. And in the cases that we know of, that they were found to be still eligible, so they have been added to the list. We have had some persons who have called to say, oh, I haven't gotten my exemption as yet. What's happening? Well, we're still delivering, but if it is that you have not gotten it as yet, you can email us at the coronavirus task force svg@gmail.com, or you can call us, or you can call the hotline still, because the COVID hotline is still there, and let us know, and we will check to see if you really are on the list, and also check with the electoral office, and then we would arrange to ensure that you get your waiver, or if we can't physically serve you with it, we would send it to you, and we will inform the electoral office that this person is free in terms of quarantine, has been given their waiver, so that they can vote.
I think we have enough time for
all of
deliveries of all of these.
Well, our community team is pretty good, huh? And I spoke with the SNO community before I came on, and the only ones that did not deliver, well, some persons were still in the field. So I know persons in the Caliquor, in the West St. George, East St. George area, the team was still out delivering. Even though we say we have about 200, a little less, fewer than 200, when we already took out those who did not require a waiver. The distribution per constituency is not that difficult in terms of it's manageable. So we will be able to do it. Even if everybody doesn't get a physical document, you will get something, either an email or the electoral office will be able to inform the polling station workers that this person is indeed eligible to vote, having been freed from quarantine.
How do you see all of this working and coming together tomorrow?
I think it should. The COVID has challenged us, and we have learned to work collaboratively, to be problem solvers. And so in terms of, take for example the protocols, we have been working on the protocols since July. We've been working closely with the electoral office. Between yesterday and day before, the team distributed gloves, masks, spray bottles with sanitizer, hand wipes, all of those things. We distributed gowns because when these persons in this group, when they come into the polling station, in addition to the masks, the poll workers would also be wearing gowns. Getting the list together, sending that out, getting all of the legislation, the orders. We have been working, problem solving, and we think that this should be fine.
Should be fine at the end of close of the polls tomorrow.
It should be fine. We just ask persons to reach out to us. As I said, we had some queries today, and within half an hour, they were solved.
Okay, we'll take a break and come right back.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'll take you step by step through the voting process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as we get ready for general elections. First, let's meet the Supervisor of Elections, Mrs. Dora James, who is appointed by the Governor General and is the overall administrator of the electoral process. Now let's see what happens on Election Day. Your polling station opens at 7 a.m. As you enter, you will see the directions for the guidance of voters in voting. The presiding officer will open the ballot box in the presence of everyone to ensure it's empty. The ballot box is then locked and placed in full view of everyone present in the polling station. When it's your turn to vote, you must present your ID card and state your name for all to hear. The poll clerk will check the voters list and ensure that your name and voter number correspond to the info on the voter registration card. The clerk will also place a mark on the voters list next to your name and voter's number. Here's what the presiding officer will do next. Examine your finger for any marks that indicate you have already voted. Put the election official mark on the ballot paper along with his or her initials. Mark the voter's number on the counterfoil of the ballot and give you instructions on how to vote. The presiding officer will also detach the ballot from the ballot book, fold it, and then hand it to you. You will then enter the private voting booth, where you would use a black lead pencil to mark an X in the space of the ballot which contains the name and symbol of your candidate choice. After voting, fold the ballot, leaving the initials of the presiding officer and the official mark visible. Hand the ballot to the presiding officer, who will check that the ballot has initials and the official mark. Once you've cast your vote, the presiding officer will then tell you to dip your right index finger in the indelible ink. He or she will then remove the counterfoil and place the ballot in the ballot box for you and all others present to see. Congratulations! You have voted. If you are in the voting line at 5 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. Thanks for watching.
Welcome back. This is our final segment. We had anticipated the Deputy Supervisor of Elections joining us via Zoom, but it's the eve of elections. I'm sure he's pretty busy and caught up with all the last-minute things that must be happening in the office at this moment. So let's talk a little bit. Well, there's a comment or two here. If you're not comfortable with the 5 days timeline, why not ban these folks?
But they're not going to be there. Persons who are in day 1 to day 5 quarantine will not be released from quarantine.
Okay.
Only persons in day 6 to day 14.
Day 14. 6 to 14.
So anybody who came into St. Vincent after Saturday the 31st, so anybody who came in on Sunday the 1st would not be given a waiver of quarantine, because by tomorrow you will still be on day 4. Because Sunday to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, your 5th day is Friday.
Okay.
So all of those persons are not going to be allowed.
All right. Someone is saying, I declare that no one has contacted me and I'm on the voting list. I only have 2 days left in quarantine. I have a document from the airport.
Okay, so that person should call the 458-6366 now, and they'll be able to speak with somebody on the task force who would be able to check. Because if that person is saying they have 2 more days in quarantine, if it is today and tomorrow, well then they would be served tomorrow. Because remember, you're only going to be allowed to be given the waiver if you have had 3 negative tests. The first test is the test you arrive with. The second test is the test that you do at the airport. And the third test should have been done today on day 4, the result of which we will get tonight, so that tomorrow on day 5, you can be released. Okay, so we're not going to give you a waiver today when you are in, if you are in on day 4, 5. You could only be given the waiver tomorrow when we have your 3 results. If it is that you are if you're claiming to be on day 13 of your quarantine, you need to get in touch with us.
Okay. Someone was asking a question off camera. If someone shows up at 5 and the line is still full, what happens to the person with the exemption certificate?
So that person, so they turn up at 5, they indicate to the police officer that they're there, they're asked to hold on, and when the line, they have arrived by 5. They will be allowed to vote after the regular persons are finished. So once you get there by 5, because as we said, the order says you arrive by 5, at least, you would be allowed to vote. You're not going to be prevented from voting once you get there by 5.
Okay, and the exemption also includes the time that it would take them to leave their place of quarantine.
Yes.
To get to the polling station.
Yes. So it's there because these persons are supposed to be home, and home should be generally nearby to your polling station. So you should be able to get to your polling station within the time to allow you to get there by 5.
Okay. So someone is saying, I'm thinking about the same bottle of ink for everyone. Should I be concerned about COVID?
So remember we said that there are about at least 3 different times when you will be sanitizing your hands. So you normally dip your finger in the ink when you're finished marking your X. So before you do that, your hands will be sanitized again. Sanitize properly, and then you'll be drying your hands to make sure the ink stays, and that's when you put your finger in the ink. You're not going to be putting your finger in the ink without sanitizing. So you have to sanitize before you put your finger in the ink. And also these polling station workers are asked to even sanitize the bottle, the container, the outside of it on a regular basis, just in case somebody might hold on to it and then put their hand on, stuff like that.
So the sanitization will be taking place at 2 different levels? Three different levels?
At least 3. Before you come in, your hands are sanitized. Before you take off the mask, you put it back on, you sanitize again. You go and you mark your X, and before you dip your finger, you sanitize again. At least 3 times.
3 times. Mm-hmm. Okay.
At least 3
so
times.
I hope that answers the concern of... okay. Please display the number to call. Yes. Can you put that number on the screen for us, please? The number that Dr.
It's 458-6366.
Okay. He says no one is answering.
What is answering?
Yeah.
Okay, let him email coronavirus task force svg@gmail.com.
So that's Corona Task Force.
Coronavirus Task Force svg@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Yes. So we'll display that number, and in any event, you can send a quick email to the email address that Dr. Keizer-Beache just gave to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other special information that you would want to Vincentians to know about the importance of staying healthy and keeping safe tomorrow?
Okay, so tomorrow we ask, as we said, to comply, wear your mask if you can, clean hands if you can, don't congregate as you shouldn't, even with normal elections. You shouldn't congregate around. But also remember, if possible, we are still, though I'm happy to say we are seeing fewer cases of dengue, we are also asking persons if they want to, if they can, wear your longer sleeves, use your insect repellent, because you're going to be standing there maybe for a while before you get in. And this is, as we all know, the mosquito that carries dengue is a day-biting mosquito. So we're thinking COVID, we're thinking safety for COVID, but we also have to remember that dengue is
we're
dealing with dengue, and so we are asking persons to wear your longer sleeves, put on your insect repellent, along with the other things that you have to do. It's quite a bit going on, but I think we could manage. But that's what I would say.
Okay, well, on that note, I think it's time for us to say goodbye from another edition of Round Table Talk. So glad you could join us, Madam CMO, this evening. I know your plate is full, but thank you as usual for doing what you do.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to get that information out.
Thank you, because it is very important. Okay, that's our program for today. We'll see you again next week. Until then, please go out and vote tomorrow, and make sure that you exercise your right to vote. Good evening. Have a pleasant Wednesday.
Dengue is a flu-like illness spread by the bite of an Aedes mosquito infected with the dengue virus. The Aedes mosquito can breed even in a small amount of water accumulated in any container-like object. Severe headache, pain behind the eyes, nausea and vomiting, high fever with 2 or more of the following symptoms: severe muscle and joint pain, a rash on the skin. Consult a doctor and do as advised. If advised hospital admission, do so immediately. If advised home-based care, take plenty of fluids, nutritious food and paracetamol for fever and pain. Prevent mosquito breeding and protect against mosquito bites. There is no treatment for dengue, but dengue can be prevented.
Hi, I'm Sandra, and I'll take you step by step through the voting process in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as we get ready for general elections. First, let's meet the Supervisor of Elections, Mrs. Dora James, who is appointed by the Governor General and is the overall administrator of the electoral process. Now let's see what happens on Election Day. Your polling station opens at 7 a.m. As you enter, you will see the directions for the guidance of voters in voting. The presiding officer will open the ballot box in the presence of everyone to ensure it's empty. The ballot box is then locked and placed in full view of everyone present in the polling station. When it's your turn to vote, you must present your ID card and state your name for all to hear. The poll clerk will check the voters list and ensure that your name and voter number correspond to the info on the voter registration card. The clerk will also place a mark on the voters list next to your name and voter's number. Here's what the presiding officer will do next. Examine your finger for any marks that indicate you have already voted. Put the election official mark on the ballot paper along with his or her initials. Mark the voter's number on the counterfoil of the ballot and give you instructions on how to vote. The presiding officer will also detach the ballot from the ballot book, fold it, and then hand it to you. You will then enter the private voting booth where you would use a black lead pencil to mark an X in the space of the ballot which contains the name and symbol of your candidate choice. After voting, fold the ballot, leaving the initials of the presiding officer and the official mark visible. Hand the ballot to the presiding officer, who will check that the ballot has initials and the official mark. Once you've cast your vote, the presiding officer will then tell you to dip your right index finger in the indelible ink. He or she will then remove the counterfoil and place the ballot in the ballot box for you and all others present to see. Congratulations! You have voted. If you are in the voting line at 5 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. Thanks for watching.
Fire and dice. Together on one scratch ticket can make your dreams come true. Yes, it's Fire and Dice. The new $10 scratch game with thousands of dollars to be won. Match your numbers with any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown up to $125,000. You can double or triple your prize with Fire and Dice. Available from all lotto agents and runners. There's cash to catch with just a scratch.